Thank you for the opportunity to address such an international audience. As I stand here before you, I'm wearing, as we say, two hats. My police hat and my hat of a person who has suffered sexual abuse in her personal past. I'm convinced, however, that both hats can fit me simultaneously. In fact, having over 20 years of experience as a vice detective and having invested a lot of time in my personal healing process, I'm certain that I can wear both hats in a way that is powerful and respectful. Thank you. As a vice instructor at the police academy, I have trained many new vice detectives in recent years. I have tried to make them understand that a stable and reliable police investigator working on a sexual assault case must find the proper balance between personal involvement and professional distance. But how do you find, and more importantly, maintain such a proper balance if you are a police officer who has herself experienced sexual or domestic violence? How great is the risk that your empathy may sway towards the victims, and that you have, perhaps unconsciously, a preconceived aversion towards perpetrators? Or, alternatively, that you will keep the stories of the victims too much at bay in order to protect yourself from their pain, tearing open old wounds within yourself? How great is the risk that this will prevent you from carrying out a neutral and objective police investigation? So I would like to tell you a little bit about myself and my own quest in this regard. As a child, I fell victim to systematic sexual abuse. After I ran away from home and from the abuse at the age of 15, I was admitted to a child psychiatric hospital. There I was treated by a child psychiatrist who once again sexually abused me. It wasn't even so much the violence in itself that caused permanent damage. It was the belief that was constantly fueled and fostered by that violence, the belief that I was worth nothing. That belief tormented me for many, many years. I chose to become a police officer, a profession that involves power and authority. As a former victim of violence, I now represented an organization in the Netherlands that has the monopoly on violence, both in terms of taking action against it and having the authority to use it. In addition to power, I also looked to my police work for meaning as well. I so much wanted to matter, to make a difference. So instead of facing my own pain first and foremost, I took on increasingly challenging and large-scale cases, and I became very good at my job. But I also overtaxed and exhausted myself in the process. I didn't yet knew at that time how to connect the personal and the professional within myself, and how to stay sane and healthy doing so. I really believe that everyone has wounds of their own that require healing. Sometimes the career you choose will be your conscious or unconscious way of finding such healing. As a vice detective, I was willing and able to witness the sexual and physical violence that was inflicted on others, women and children in particular. But I allowed my own history to come to the surface in little bits and pieces. Still, I managed to become a good vice detective and over time, and later a knowledgeable vice instructor at the police academy. My work offered me a way of being valuable to others, but I didn't do such a good job of being valuable to myself. Together with a therapist, I finally found the courage to listen to my own story. In it, between all the rubble caused by the abuse, I discovered my own powerful ability to survive. I gained a better understanding of how guilt and shame are almost similar to a sexually transmitted disease, in that they hitch a ride with the abuse and lodge themselves in your entire system like a parasite. I learned to recognize the survival skills I had been forced to develop as a child in response to the violence. I became aware that the alertness, focus, and the versatility that had helped me at the time of the abuse had continued to help me in my work as a vice detective, even if I didn't know it. Personal experience with sexual abuse only turns into experiential expertise once you have found the guts to bear witness to your own history, to unmask the strengths and weaknesses that a trauma has compelled you to develop, so that you may use those same characteristics in a positive way to do meaningful work. It requires guts to face your own history of violence. It's certainly not an easy road to take, but I'm convinced that it is the only path to transforming the skills that helped you to survive into true high-quality police work in the demanding field of sexual violence. By publishing my collection of poems, titled Enough, and my book, titled The Sum of All Parts, or in Dutch, De Som der Delen, I have publicly and clearly shared the fact that behind my expertise and professional skills, at the same time, hides a vulnerable and also powerful woman who was abused as a child. I have shared this fact with the public at large, and most importantly for me, with my fellow police force members. And I fully believe that it's essential for all policemen and women who have been subject to violence or abuse in their childhood to recognize and acknowledge the damage that was done to them and the impact this damage has on their police work, conscious or unconscious. Sharing my personal story, my personal history, is my way of drawing attention to those police force members who have experienced violence in their own lives and who manage to use this experience professionally in a courageous and open-hearted manner that does not compromise justice. Also, I would like to send a powerful message of encouragement to those members of the force who have not yet found the courage to take their personal trauma out of the shadows of shame and into the light. I sincerely hope that my books will help them to do so. Thank you very much.
Therese Evers. Thank you very much for your courageous story and your actions. So, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Once again, welcome back, Your Royal Highness. Before we start the plenary this afternoon, I have a couple of things I'd like to share with you. Good news, to be honest, because all plenaries and several workshops and the summaries are now online on YouTube. Yes. So, of course, that's very important for all of us here, but please share it with your colleagues and your family members, and on Twitter and on Facebook. Just share it. And this includes, because many of you have asked for it, the news broadcast we did on Monday, and of course, Queen Maxima's speech yesterday. Pictures are taken during the conference, and they are uploaded every day. And on the screen behind me, as if by miracle, you will see all the different ways that you can connect to the global network of women's shelters. And make sure that you share online using the hashtag 3WCWS. Let's just leave this on for a little while. So I actually see a little mistake here. It's 3WCWS for the hashtag. Remember to put the 3 in front. So visit those films and share them around with your family members and your colleagues, and maybe even your neighbors. Might be a good way to chat with them. You never know if you need a reason. So let's now move on to the content of this afternoon. We will spend this afternoon tackling the theme of global and regional networks, and we are very proud that a popular and very influential member of the Danish royal family is with us to share her views on the importance of international cooperation. She's closely involved with the World Health Organization, and she also attended the 2nd World Conference of Women's Shelters in Washington, D.C. 4 years ago. So please welcome once again Her Royal Highness Crown Princess Mary of Denmark.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, as mentioned, I had the pleasure of attending the conference in 2012 in Washington. So it is a real pleasure for me to be able to be here today and to participate in the 3rd World Conference of Women's Shelters. Plenary Session 4 is all about the importance of international cooperation. It's about our ability to work together, to share best practices, to share our knowledge and experiences, and to make local, regional, and global commitments in our efforts to stop violence against women and girls around the world. In 2000, the UN General Assembly agreed on 8 Millennium Development Goals. The MDGs were revolutionary in providing a common language to reach global agreement on achieving progress in the world's developing countries. And we have made significant progress. But that progress has been far from uniform across and within countries, and the goals that lag the most are those goals that had women and girls at their core. Goal 3 was to promote gender equality and the empowerment of women. Surprisingly, there was no specific target directed at eliminating violence against women and girls. Now, awareness of violence has grown over the past 15 years and has been increasingly recognized as a global epidemic of alarming proportions and as an urgent human rights and public health priority. And today, legal prohibitions are more extensive, but gaps remain, and political will has been intensified. But the reality is that much more needs to be done, both for prevention and for response. Despite this mobilization and intensification of commitments, 1 in 3 women worldwide have experienced physical or sexual violence, the vast majority at the hand of her husband or partner. Globally, as many as 38% of all murders of women are committed by intimate partners. Nearly 1/3 of adolescent girls who have been in a relationship have experienced violence at the hands of their partner. And the first sexual experience of up to 1/3 of women is forced. Shocking numbers, And it's so important that we remember and recognize the individual and their stories that these numbers represent. We need to understand the dynamics behind these numbers if we want to change those numbers. Violent behavior is strongly influenced by our cultural and social norms. That is, rules of expectations or behavior within our societies. Unspoken social standards of appropriate and inappropriate behavior that govern our interaction with others. We know that large shares of women, men, and young people in various countries still believe violence is justified for reasons such as a woman leaving the home without permission, or that she's burnt the dinner to that evening's meal. Globally, nearly half of adolescent girls aged 15 to 19 think a husband or partner is justified in hitting his wife in certain circumstances. And in many societies, female children are valued less than men. Communities continue to adhere to harmful traditional cultural practices, such as female genital mutilation and child marriages. The complexity of violence is obvious. Violence against women remains chronically underreported, and information on laws addressing gender-based violence is also sparse. Hundreds of millions of women live in countries where domestic violence is not a crime, or where laws do exist, enforcement is lacking. Constitutional change and strong legal frameworks are fundamental, but alone haven't been able to change the statistics. Let's take the example of child brides, a clear breach of human rights and a social norm closely linked to partner violence. And I'd like to use this example to demonstrate how legislation and social norms can contradict one another. In many countries, child marriages are technically illegal. However, girls continue to be married off before they're 18, and many before they are 15. Why is this when the law is so clear? Well, in these countries, the law is rarely enforced, and there often exists a silent acceptance of child marriages amongst officials, communities, and leaders. But something else is at play: social pressures and tradition. In many countries, a girl's education is not seen as important as her role is in the house. Unmarried girls are often sexually harassed, and marriages are seen as a way to protect them and ensure respect for them. And if a girl is not married by the time she is 18, her prospects of finding a partner are often very limited. A mother of a 15-year-old bride said that she saw nothing wrong with the marriage, as it is normal in their community. She believed that this marriage was the best for her daughter and her daughter's future. Social pressures are extremely strong and binding. To not adhere to them is often a harder decision to make than breaking the law. Therefore, a change in social norms and traditions must form any part of a solution to end violence against women and girls. Violence does not discriminate, but takes place in all social spheres, in all cultures, and in all countries. Take my country, for example, Denmark. We have strong legislation and enforcement in place. We have an impressive record on gender equality. Culturally and socially, violence is condemned and not accepted, and it's an area with focus and a broad range of organisations and initiatives established to combat violence against women and girls. Despite this, more than 7% of young Danish women who have been in a relationship have experienced violence at the hands of their partner. And 35% of women fleeing to a women's shelter have been there before. And still, many women remain silent about violence. So these figures are much higher in reality. So why does violence continue to persist in an environment where socially and politically it should not be able to? Now, there's no simple answer, but part of it is that in Denmark, violence continues to exist in the dark. There's still so much shame and blame associated with intimate partner violence, and it's just not something we talk about. So even though a country like mine that has made great strides, we still need to break the silence and confront the social norms that silence victims. We need women, men, girls and boys to recognize and say no to violence, whether they are victims, survivors, perpetrators or bystanders. We must stand together and speak out about violence. In other words, we need to create a paradigm shift. I find it perplexing that men are often erased from the discussion when we talk about violence against women and girls. Men need to more actively take part in this discussion, not as part of the problem, but as part of the solution. This must be a joint agenda. The majority of men are not violent. We need that majority to challenge the minority who are. So let's go back to looking at attitudes and norms. When men challenge men, it works. When men lose status in the eyes of another man, it works. So we need men to speak out. We need them to talk about violence and to react when they witness not only violence, but also the norms supporting the violence. Secondly, we need to support men in stopping their violent behaviour. If we can remove the cause, we can change the effect. Violence and powerlessness are deeply connected. In spring, I met with 4 Danish men who had all been violent in their intimate relationships. I met them at a group session of the Danish organisation Dialogue Against Violence, and they were attending a program aimed at changing their patterns and ending their violent behaviour. These 4 men succeeded. From not one day to the next, but by continuously working over a longer period with anger management and self-awareness. To this day, they still feel the same anger that used to end in violence. And that anger will probably always be with them. But now they are able to recognize it early enough to control it. Now, even though it can be difficult to understand, we have to accept that the greatest wish of many of the women living with a violent partner is for the violence to stop and for the family to remain together. By supporting these men, their families are today still living as a family with their challenges, but free of violence. It is a sensitive issue, I know. Helping violent men can be seen as shifting focus away from the women, the victims, the survivors. Working with perpetrators of violence should never compromise the support and work to empower women who have been victims and survivors of violence. That goes without saying. In some cases, men are not ready or open to being helped. But we need to start addressing the fact that violent men, not in all, but in some cases, can be helped. With the right interventions, behaviour can change. Last year, I visited South Africa and a small local NGO called Brothers for Life, an organisation that engages men and boys as agents of change. Through their work and dedication, they have mobilised local communities, primarily men, to change behaviour and find alternative strategies to resolving conflict within their near relations, and with really good results. It was the words of the men who today embrace their roles as fathers and husbands that had the greatest impact on me. And I would like to share the words of one of the brothers as they refer to themselves. He was an older, charismatic man, actually a relatively well-known actor. And he described himself as an experienced wife-beater from a long line of abusers. He went on to say, "I was blessed to join this program, and today I am a transformed perpetrator. If I can change, so can they." Brothers for Life's core is that no man is born violent. Violence is something that is learned through observing our parents, through men who are believed to be role models within our communities, and through the manner in which the mass media represent gender relationships. By communicating the message, a real man is protective towards women, Brothers for Life successfully links nonviolent behaviour to masculinity and creates positive new role models. Their aim is to break the cycle of violence through mobilising communities to adopt a zero tolerance towards gender-based violence. Now, the case in South Africa is a good example of male role models as powerful agents of change. And in my foundation, the Mary Foundation, one of our main focus areas is violence against women. And in the beginning of 2015, we invited Brothers for Life to come to Denmark and meet with us and the Danish organisation Dialogue Against Violence, which I referred to. Now, Dialogue Against Violence has developed over a longer period evidence-based methodologies and programs to work with men who want to change their violent behaviour. Now, Brothers for Life now have access to these learnings, and in combination with their role model approach, these two organisations are working together to create a new program targeted at men in South Africa. And for us in Denmark, we have the opportunity to learn more about how to address and involve men in our work. This partnership is an excellent example of the value of international collaboration. Eliminating all forms of violence against women and girls cannot be achieved without joint international, regional, and local action. In September, the UN adopted 17 new Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, and 169 targets that provide the blueprint for the world's development over the coming 15 years. Never before have world leaders pledged common actions across such a broad and universal policy agenda that applies to all nations and all people. Women and girls as critical drivers of development have been strongly recognised throughout the agenda, and more specifically by goal number 5, to achieve gender equality and empower all women and girls. And one of the targets under goal 5 is to eliminate all forms of violence against all women and girls in public and private spheres, including through the engagement of men and boys. And I strongly welcome the addition of these words, including through the engagement of men and boys, in the declaration by the member states of the UN. In agreeing upon this goal and target, it is recognised that each country commits itself to mobilising the means to implement the agenda through revitalised global partnerships for sustainable development, the participation of all countries, all stakeholders, and all people. Systematic follow-up and review of information will be conducted over the next 15 years at national, regional, and global levels, and this will provide for increased peer learning and sharing of best practices. This will provide a set of global indicators that are being developed to assist this work, and it is acknowledged that efforts will need to be intensified to strengthen statistical capacities in developing countries. The global indication framework will be finalised next March, March 2016, and will be complemented by indicators at the regional and national levels, which will be developed by the member states. And this framework is absolutely essential to tracking the progress and ensuring that no one is left behind. Achieving gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls will make a crucial contribution to the achievement across all 17 goals. And our ability to achieve truly transformative change and results across all goals is dependent on the progress we achieve for women and girls. A sustainable world cannot exist if one half of humanity continues to be denied their full human rights and opportunities. And with the adoption of the new Sustainable Development Goals, we now have a tool for coordinated international action. The 2030 Agenda has given us a common goal, and now is the time for implementation within families, societies, and countries. Now is the time to transform this agenda into a reality, a new reality for millions of women and girls around the world, a life free of violence. Legislation and enforcement alone are not enough. Changing behaviour and social norms, increased knowledge and understanding, raising awareness and reporting, intensified commitments and investments, and strong global partnerships are all critical to prevention and response. At this conference, we gather and share experience and know-how from all around the world. We add new perspectives on how to prevent and respond to violence. We stand united and therefore strong. My hope is that next time we meet, our progress towards our common goal will be great, and that more men from all over the world will join us on this journey. We need all the voices we can get if we want a world free of violence. It is up to us to create a culture where violence is never accepted and can never be justified. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Princess Mary. Thank you very much for emphasizing the role of men and boys in this topic. Thank you so much. So moving on, ladies and gentlemen. In June of this year, Rashida Manjoo left office as the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women. Ms. Manjoo handed over her responsibilities to Dubravka Simonovic. So what legacy does Rashida Manjoo leave behind? What strings did she leave untied? What will Dubravka Simonovic take with her from the Manjoo years? And what will she do differently? What will be the top priorities on her agenda? They are both here to talk about past, present, and future. Please welcome the two UN Special Rapporteurs. Ms. Manjoo will speak first. Please, nice to meet you. Let's sit here.
Thank you very much to all of you, first of all, for the many ways that you have helped to inform and shape the work of the mandate during the 6 years that I served the United Nations in this position. Part of our mandates are to seek and receive information, to recommend measures, ways, and means to eliminate violence against women, its causes and consequences, and to adopt a comprehensive and universal approach to the elimination of violence against women, its causes and consequences. If it was not for the work that many of you do, whether it's direct service provision, whether it's advocacy work, whether it's legal work, our reports would be much poorer in terms of the information, either through our country missions, through our thematic reports. So once again, thank you very much for being part of the journey for 6 years, but importantly, for allowing us into the mandate holders into your world for short periods of time to help us to enable us to provide a perspective to member states when we report to the Human Rights Council and the General Assembly. In terms of what I've done over the last 6 years, I have produced 6 thematic reports, and 5 for the Human Rights Council in Geneva and 5 for the General Assembly in New York. The thematic reports are an attempt by mandate holders to try and push the conceptual understandings on violence against women, its causes and consequences for member states, for the donor community, for civil society. Unfortunately, there are still countries, government officials, civil society representatives who do not accept that violence against women is more than domestic violence. So it's a battle we still have to take forward and move. I have also conducted 19 country investigations in the 6 years, and there's 19 country reports, ranging from countries that are post-conflict, countries that are in conflict currently, Somalia, Honduras, Afghanistan, to countries that are at so-called peace. My challenge is that I cannot talk about a country at peace where over half the population is in some kind of abusive relationship, either private actors or state actors. The other way of seeking and receiving information is to receive investigative complaints, individuals, organizations, etc. And the communications procedure is a really important procedure in the toolbox of the mandate. Unfortunately, it's not utilized as much as we would like. The promotional work of the mandate through participation in conferences, etc. As regards shelters, the mandate's findings over the 6 years, the challenges that many of you face in terms of numbers, the scarcity, inadequacy to meet the needs and the demands, the lack of funding directly from the state, the struggles to survive financially are a huge challenge that I've heard about over and over again. Access challenges in terms of the rural-urban divide, in terms of access for people that are differently abled, access because communities and leaders in communities act as gatekeepers, not allowing women access to shelters is a challenge I've heard over and over in different contexts. I've also heard directly from survivors about conditions in shelters, whether it's the facilities, the rules, the staffing issues. And I think these are issues that you are experts on and try through training, through these forums, through the sharing of information. The services that are offered, do they cater for the multiple needs? Is there a mainstreaming of services as well as specificity? Does the service address diversity and difference with respect? These are important issues. The effectiveness of services and meeting the needs of survivors. The outcome and impact on women's lives during and post their stay in shelters. The consequences for women if shelters do not exist, including a consequence of women going into sex work because there are no alternatives. So I think these are important issues that you've engaged with. In the 6 years, I have highlighted in my 2014 report to the General Assembly and the Human Rights Council some of the persisting, continuing, systemic, and new challenges that we face in the quest to eliminate violence against women and girls. I include the girl child in the work I do, despite the resolution not addressing the girl child. One of the challenges is regarding state responses. The lack of acceptance and understanding of violence against women and girls as a human rights issue that has consequences for the realization of all human rights and for the effective exercise of citizenship is something that is there's no general consensus on. It's an area we have to work on. The inadequate state responses, the minimum time, effort, and resources that are allocated for effective redress is a challenge. minimum efforts to deal with the problem in a systematic, comprehensive, and sustained manner, inadequate attention to investigating patterns, causes, and consequences of violence, underreporting, few prosecutions, and even fewer convictions is the norm in many parts of the world. Sanctions often do not reflect the seriousness of the crime that is perpetrated. The failure to address the individual, the institutional, and the structural aspects of causes and consequences of violence against women and girls is an issue. Another challenge that I identify in my reports is the failure of states to fulfill their obligation to act with due diligence to eliminate violence against women. The failure to understand that the framework of state responsibility demands a dual responsibility. Individual responsibility to act with due diligence so that states understand the obligations they owe to the individual that's been harmed or the group of individuals that's been harmed, including to prevent, protect, punish, and provide effective remedies. But there is a second obligation, the systemic obligation, that states need to understand, the obligation to ensure a holistic and sustained model of redress that is transformative. The word transformative gets used a lot, but I'm not sure if we move beyond the rhetoric of the word, and also one that addresses the issue of institutional and structural aspects. Another issue that I've identified is the persisting public-private dichotomy in responses to violence against women. So unequal and discriminatory responses to violence against women, which further relegate women to the private sphere. State responses are reinforced by economic and social aspects, including stereotypes and myths, as we've heard in so many of the presentations. The gender pay gap, which is a reality across the globe. The double burden of production and reproduction, which often limits the autonomy and choices of women. The impact of systems of guardianship or legal instruments which are designed to limit women's access to the public sphere, and the consequences of normalization and acceptance of violence that occurs in private spaces. Another challenge is the shift to neutrality in laws, policies, programs, and practices. The shift from an approach of specificity, including in respect of the empowerment of women and girls, to gender mainstreaming, and more recently to gender neutrality, is a challenge. The understanding of equality as formal equality and not substantive equality is a challenge which demands we need to be looking at that. In terms of violence against women and girls, gender neutrality implies that male victims of violence require and deserve comparable resources to those afforded to female victims. This ignores the reality that violence against men is neither systemic nor pandemic in the way that violence against women and girls is. It also ignores issues of male power and privilege, gender inequality and discrimination, etc. Another challenge I've identified is the shift in understanding of a gendered response and the move towards a focus on men and boys. This avoids addressing the disproportionate and differentiated impact of violence against women and girls. Men's groups have moved from being targets of engagement and allies to being leaders of initiatives on gender equality. This has resulted in a shift in resources, in political support and public profile of the work of women's rights activists and organizations. I hope our moderator is taking that time into account of my 8 minutes. Often the focus in some of the programs in the country, and with all due respect, we need to work with men and boys, but we need to be interrogating these programs. Often the focus is not on women as autonomous beings disproportionately affected by inequality, discrimination, and violence. Rather, violence against women is conflated with the interests of men and boys, and it's something we do need to talk about. The lack of transformative remedies that address the root causes of violence against women at the individual, institutional, and structural factors and looking at causes and consequences. There is a need for specific measures to address violence against women and girls as a gender-specific human rights violation. A holistic human rights framework requires protection, prevention, and empowerment approaches. An approach that needs to take into account the historical, the current, and future realities of the lives of women and girls through a lens of indivisibility and interdependency of rights. We also have to avoid the creation of hierarchies and, consequently, the privileging of certain manifestations of violence against women, example, trafficking, sexual violence in conflict, FGM, and early and forced marriages. We have to look at these manifestations through the lens of a continuum of violence. These are not new manifestations. Maybe the prevalence rates have gone up, maybe the form and shape has changed, but there is a continuum of violence approach that needs to be understood instead of a privileging and feeling more offended at certain manifestations of violence as opposed to others. The financial crisis, austerity measures, cuts in social services spending is again something that I have found in many of my country visits. Globally, the funding cuts are to social services. That's the norm, not cuts to military budgets or to addressing corruption in the public and private spheres. The funding cuts for core service provision, including legal, shelter, counseling services, policy and advocacy work, results in the increasing vulnerability of women and girls, but also the weakening of the women's rights sector. The funding cuts to NGOs, to women's rights NGOs, as a form of reprisal against the work of women human rights defenders is also an issue that we need to talk about. The lack of a legally binding obligations to eliminate violence against women in the UN system is a source of concern, and I've written 2 reports on this. The existence of a normative gap under international human rights law is a source of deep concern. The practice in the UN is one of normativity without legality, the subject of my 2013 report to the Council. It's about passing resolutions, declarations, etc., which are of persuasive value but are not legally binding. So I have deep concerns about how do we hold states accountable when under international human rights law, we do not have any provisions or a legally binding instrument or a specialized monitoring body for a human rights violation that is widespread, that is systemic, and that is so pervasive that every country in the world is affected by it. The Americas and Europe have legally binding instruments, regional instruments, but Europe and the Americas is not the world. There's a whole other world that exists out there. So we have to think about the universality. Approach that we want to adopt for all other human rights violations, but why is it that there's resistance to a universal approach to addressing violence against women, which is a pervasive and widespread human rights violation? So in conclusion, at the national level, transformative action, there are 3 pillars that I have used in the last 6 years. The state responsibility to ensure that accountability is the norm and not impunity, through an independent and efficient judicial system that is responsive and respectful, and one that provides effective remedies that are transformative. Accountability of direct perpetrators of harm, but accountability of state officials who fail in their duties to protect and to prevent harm. The second pillar is that we have to ensure that an empowerment approach to women, taking into account socioeconomic realities, historical disadvantage, current context, and diversity and difference. We have to provide necessary tools, resources, and opportunities to ensure that women can become active agents in their own lives, in the choices they make. We have to develop more substantive and sustainable measures in respect of political, economic, and social transformation at the individual, institutional, and structural levels. This requires accepting, understanding that violence against women and girls is a barrier to the realization of all human rights and to the effective exercise of citizenship. So women and girls cannot contribute to their families, their communities, their countries, to the world, if violence is part and parcel of serving as a barrier to the effective exercise of citizenship. Thank you very much for your attention.
I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me to participate at this Third World Conference on Shelters. As newly appointed United Nations Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women, its causes and consequences, I have a feeling that I am at the right place to be, at the right moment, at the beginning of my mandate. I am very grateful to all of you, especially to those that shared their personal stories related to violence against women. I think that we need to connect work of the Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women and work of this global movement to have connection between regional and global networks on shelters. I would like to thank my predecessor, Ms. Rashida Manjoo, who, with two former mandate holders. First one was Ms. Radhika Kumaraswamy, and second one was Ms. Yakin Ertug, greatly contributed to clarify the origin, different forms, root causes, prevalence, and state responsibility to act with due diligence to prevent violence against women and girls in public and private sphere. Thanks to all three of them, I am continuing this mandate that has become a visible and credible tool to provide key recommendations to governments that are having the major responsibility in this area, then to non-governmental organizations and all other stakeholders, including international communities. I will continue to use strong tools already used by my predecessors, and they were briefly explained by Ms. Rashida Manjoo. I will continue with country visits. I will this December go on invitation by South Africa to visit that country, and result is going to be a report on violence against women in that country. Then I will continue with thematic reports that will focus on specific issues, and my first thematic report will be vision setting report, in which I will express my priorities for the period in front of me, and I hope that at the end of my term I will be able to see together with you concrete results. I would also like to use special communication procedure that are mandate holders using to address different urgent issues. You can send me appeal letters, and then I can respond with letters to governments to see what is currently going on in this area of violence against women. But in addition to what was achieved up to now, I would also like to focus on additional follow-up procedure, because now at the UN level we have seen many recommendations that are related to elimination of discrimination against women and violence against women. But what we are not seeing is implementation of those recommendations. And what we really mean when we say implementation. Implementation is a word that we are using a lot, but we have to see concrete results. We have to see how this is reflected on individual women's life, living in shelters, living at home, to prevent different forms of violence against women. So I will try to focus on that, and then based on my experience gained during my 12 years as a member of the CEDAW committee. I was an independent expert in a committee that monitors implementation of the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. Under that convention, that committee developed different tools, and also in line with its mandate focuses on violence against women. I will focus on implementation gaps between different agendas that we are using now, because I have seen that countries are using on one side CEDAW Convention, 189 state parties are using CEDAW Convention as one tool. Then they're using Beijing Platform for Action as another tool and reporting how they're implementing Beijing. Then they're having 1325 UN Security Council resolution and looking how they're having national implementation plans, what they are doing there. And somehow there are missing links, that those plans are not connected. There is no joint synergy between those plans. And when we look at violence against women, now from work of all my predecessors, including Ms. Rashida Manjoo, we are clear that we need holistic approach. We need to have good connection between different agencies that are working at the ground and that are addressing violence against women. And the same is happening at the global level. So we need to have synergies between different agendas and better connections between different mandates. Because my mandate, this mandate, was established in '94. In the meantime, some additional special rapporteurs were also mandated to look into different discriminatory laws and different sexual violence during the war. So I think that it is important to connect with work of others and to see how we are proceeding with implementation of recommendations coming from different mechanisms dealing with violence against women. I would also like to mention that if we look at the CEDAW Convention as a global convention and this mandate, if we look back at founding resolution, how this mandate was established, it is clear that Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women, its causes and consequences, should use Universal Declaration on Human Rights as a broader platform than international treaties in the field of human rights, CEDAW Convention, Declaration on Violence Against Women, and also Beijing Platform for Action. If we look at all those documents and how they are used, now we can clearly in a position to state that violence against women is a human rights violation and form of discrimination against women. It is now clear, it is coming out from those norms. With adoption of the CEDAW Convention, it was clear that women's rights are human rights. That was done by the CEDAW Convention. And now we have to be clear when we are sending those messages to governments that they have this responsibility. Since I'm in Netherlands, in Hague, I would like to mention Professor Kees Flinterman, that was man CEDAW committee member for 2 terms in CEDAW committee, and he contributed a lot to work of that committee. He was a key person for elaboration of General Recommendation number 28 and some individual communications related to violence against women. And here I would like to mention a little bit more individual communications and work that could be done by individuals. And we have seen during this conference some persons from Morocco or some other countries that are using mechanisms at the national level and then mechanisms at the international level to change the situation in their countries, to help victims, to help survivors of violence against women, but then to change the legal situation. And we are seeing, for example, that optional protocol that was adopted in 2000 to CEDAW Convention is giving such possibilities, as well as communications procedure and the Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women. Here we have with us Rosa Logar. She will speak later on. She was person from Austria who helped victims from Austria to launch complaints in cases of femicide under the CEDAW Convention. And in that specific 2 cases, CEDAW committee adopted recommendations that are now applicable to all other countries. There are now standards that are applied all over the world, and they were transformed later on in standards of Istanbul Convention. So we are seeing progress. Also, Genoveva Tisheva is somewhere from Bulgaria Center for Training of Women, and she also helped victims from her country to launch complaints, 2 complaints on violence against women, and now we are seeing that they are receiving compensation in specific cases, and even laws has been changed in a situation related to penal law. So we are seeing positive changes, what means that mechanisms should be used. This mechanism of Special Rapporteur should be used in all cases when you see that you have exhausted domestic remedies and that international protection could help you. Very briefly, I hope that my mandate will also contribute to implementation of the goal number 5 of 2030 agenda. That goal was mentioned by Your Excellency and some other speakers during previous discussions. And we are seeing now that at UN global level. We have this global agenda that is for the first time putting as a goal achieving gender equality, not only gender equality, but achieving gender equality and empowerment of women. What is going into the direction of substantive equality. And now we have to be clear, and personally I think that indicators are not sufficient. We have to look how we are going to have full implementation of those goals related to violence against women. And it is great that we have this goal on elimination of violence against women. But now we have to look into results. Now we have to say that CEDAW Convention, Beijing Platform for Action, 1325, all regional instruments that are dealing with violence against women, Belém do Pará, African Charter and Protocol, Istanbul Convention, they all should be pulled together when we are looking at implementation of this goal number 5 and violence against women. So we have to see clear results in a period of few years. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen in the next 15 years. Personally, I attended the Beijing conference in 1995, and at that time, I believed that we will abolish discriminatory laws in 5 years. That never happened. Still, we have discriminatory laws. So we have to be clever now at this level of development with globalization and everything else to achieve concrete results. I would also like to mention that I will have a meeting with CEDAW committee next month. I will also have a meeting with GRAVIO committee established under the Istanbul Convention, Council of Europe Convention that is dealing with violence against women and domestic violence. And I had great opportunity with some colleagues from this room to participate in elaboration of that convention. I was co-chair of the committee that elaborated that Council of Europe Convention, and we saw all challenges related to harmonization of different standards related to shelters, related to protection orders, related to criminal law provisions that are needed, related to this idea of comprehensive approach to violence against women, cooperation between different agencies that should respond in such cases. So I think that it is a huge challenge, but as a special rapporteur, I will try to cooperate with regional bodies that are dealing with monitoring of implementation of regional instruments, and I hope also to reach bodies from Latin America and African region. Then I have also focus on femicides, and here I will continue with part of the work already done by my predecessor Rashida. She published a very good report on femicides, and now if we look what is still needed to be done, I think that now what we really need is to have a femicide watch. I will call all states to publish data on number of women killed by their partners, ex-partners, or women killed by so-called honor crimes or witchcrafts and so on. I think that such numbers are preventive tools, and I will also invite all non-governmental organizations together with governments to look at such numbers and to look at concrete cases to see what was missed in concrete case in order to prevent those preventable deaths of women. So I think that now it is time to look into concrete numbers and how to decrease those preventable deaths of women. Very briefly, with respect to possible strengthening of legal framework here, I would like to state that I intend to continue discussion to see what is still needed. Personally, I am really focused on implementation gaps because I have seen that in many countries, even after adoption of CEDAW Convention, optional protocol, they are not used, they are not integrated, they are not incorporated. Those norms are not giving clear effect at the national level. So now it is really hard work for all of us to see how to integrate those norms, how to give them life at the national level. And then we have to see from other regional bodies what is their view with respect to what is still missed at the international level. So I have already stated before General Assembly that I will invite all regional commissions that are monitoring this area of violence against women to provide their views and inputs. And here I'm also calling you, non-governmental organizations, to present your views, to present your ideas, and to participate in this whole discussion. With respect to future activities, I think that we need to focus more on prevention of violence against women. I know that this is a huge area, but prevention is an area that should be our priority. We need to look at obligations of states to modify harmful stereotypes on gender roles, and we do have some good examples, but unfortunately we are seeing that all over the world those stereotypes, patriarchal stereotypes, are prevailing. Then states have obligation to repeal all national penal and family laws that discriminate against women and girls, that are conducive to violence against women. Men and boys should be also included in this fight. Awareness-raising campaign, education at all levels, including university educations and training of professionals. So now I'm reaching the end of my statement, I know. And my last point is related to shelters, because shelters are very important building blocks in this fight to combat violence against women. During my country visits, I will try to visit shelters and to include in reports recommendations related to shelters. I will also try to use Council of Europe Article 23 on shelters. That is something that could be now applied to all countries as a standard. And I hope that next time when we'll meet, I will be able to report on certain progress. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Rashida Manjoo and Dubravka Simonovic. And I'm so sorry I had to cut you short, but we do have issues of time. And to be honest, we are running extremely late, and our princess needs to go. So without much further ado, I would like to invite Bandana Rana, the chair of this conference, to come on stage and please do your presentation first, and then we'll continue the rest of the program. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Your Royal Highness, distinguished excellencies, delegates, friends. This is the third day of the conference, and I hope you are enjoying and using every moment of it to make friends, to strengthen network, to raise your voice, and to speak out. I really hope you're doing that. And there's another opportunity for you to do that, which is extremely important. This afternoon, the regional caucuses are meeting, and I really encourage you to take part in those caucuses, particularly to make new friends, to strengthen your regional network, but also because we have a call for action tomorrow, and we would like your perceptions and your views to be integrated in the call for action if you have urgent actions over there. So I really encourage you to take part in the caucus meetings this afternoon. With that, because I know that we are already over time, but I would really like to thank the former rapporteur as well as the present rapporteur, because these were very valid contributions which laid the foundation for the shelter work. As our speaker, our rapporteur just said, that shelter work needs to be highlighted, needs to be focused, needs to be taken into account when you are working on violence against women. So thank you very much. With that, thank you. With that, I would like to now go to present to you the global data count of the Global Network of Women's Shelters. And yes, okay. As you know, the objective of this global data count is to showcase and present the work of shelters, to focus attention on the work of the shelters, which has been neglected for so many years in terms of resources, in terms of building capacity, in terms of actually reaching out to those survivors who need a shelter and protection for them when they don't have any place to go. That is the purpose of the global data count. So what is this global data count? What we do is there is one particular day that is chosen, and the number of shelters who take part in this global data count contribute to how they record how many women and children come to the shelter that day, how many could be given services, and how many were not able to be given services because of lack of capacity and constraint of resources. I'm just moving fast because of the time constraint. We started this global data count in 2009, and 24 countries participated in this global data count in 2009. In 2015, There are 46 countries who have taken part in this global data count, and we hopefully feel that in 2016 there will be at least 100 countries that will be taking part in this global data count. I encourage all those countries who are present here to kindly take part in this data count. In spite of it being only 46 countries, but if you look at the number of institutions or shelters who took part, it is 2,500 institutions or shelters that took part in this data count. The number of women who were helped on this particular day was 53,230, and the number of children who were helped were 34,794. Yes. But very sad to say that 7,337 women could not access services due to lack of constraint of resources, lack of capacity of shelters, and also 4,410 children had to be driven back. They were sent away because they could not be integrated because of lack of resources and capacity in the shelters. And this is a staggering number. You can imagine in one day, so many survivors of violence do not have a shelter, do not have protection, do not know where to go, do not have redress. So this is a staggering number in a day. This shows how important shelter work is. There are some quotes from the shelters which, the survivors are very relieved when they come to the shelter. The most important thing is they feel very secure. They thank the shelters for, some of the quotes are, "Thank you for saving my life. I feel safe here, and that is all I need right now." We are in a magical house, that's what the children say. And I liked when we played together and you listened to me. The power of collective voice is extremely over there. The power of being able to speak out. The power of a healing hand is extremely powerful. That is what the shelters do all around the world. Having said that, I would also like to encourage, again, all those who are present here, the countries, 115 countries who are present here, to kindly take this seriously and take part in the data count. The data count has been coordinated by our Canadian sisters. If you want information on them, we have our coordinator, Jeanne Reimer, somewhere here. You will find her. Please, yes, she's there, so please find information from her. Thank you so much. With that, I would like to present the 2015 data count to Her Royal Highness, Princess Mary. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. We really hope that there will be a lot of attention on shelter work now with your leadership. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Would you like to say a word?
Thank you so much. It's been wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bandana,
So with that,
I'm improvising.
I take leave.
Yes, please take
Thank
leave.
you so
I'm
much.
improvising here. I'm going to call you back in a while.
Really?
Yes,
Okay,
just
thank you.
to recap this afternoon. So don't leave the premises.
Thank you.
So I believe this is the moment that Princess Mary has to leave us. Thank you so much for being with us. It's been very inspirational. Goodbye. So thinking on my feet here, ladies and gentlemen, because actually the session would have to be finished already by now, but we still have a little way to go. So I'm switching around the script, but you don't know the script, so you don't know the difference. So it's time to talk about the excellent news that goes with sharing the good practices on international cooperation. And for that, I have a small panel discussion with 3 members. I'd like to invite now Rosa Logar, who is a member of Gravio, the group of experts on action to end violence against women and domestic violence. Please come on stage, Rosa Logar. Thank you. Also, I'd like you to move over to our desk over there. Also, Marleen Temmermans, who is the Director of Reproductive Health and Research of the World Health Organization. Ms. Temmermans, please join us. And last but certainly not least, Maya Groff, who is the Hague Conference, who works on the Hague Conference on Private International Law. Ladies, please join us here. Thank you so much. So starting with Rosa Logar, please explain to us what is Grevio and what does your work entail?
Thank you. First, I wanted to thank the organizers on behalf of the Grevio committee and my colleagues in the committee for inviting me to this conference. I'm the vice chair of Grevio. Feride Acha is the chair, and Marceline Nodi from Malta is the second vice chair. So we thank you for this invitation. Grevio is a newly elected body of 10 independent experts that will monitor the so-called Istanbul Convention. So what is the Istanbul Convention? For those of you who haven't heard about it yet, it's the first legally binding instrument in Europe, a comprehensive instrument to prevent violence against women and domestic violence. You can find it online on the Council of Europe website in many languages, and also I've heard from the colleagues here that it also has been translated into Chinese from the colleagues in Taiwan. We have heard that the states are responsible to implement all these measures in this comprehensive document of 80 articles. And the human rights and victim survivor-centered approach is the core of this convention. So I really hope this convention will, as Hina Gilani said yesterday, provide protection and empowering support and dignity to the survivors, that it will strengthen this effort to guarantee this right. The convention also has an article on the importance of NGOs, and especially also women's NGOs. And Grevio will ask all of you for your expertise. We will ask you to provide information, to provide shadow reports. This will be very important for the work of Grevio. We are facing challenges, as you know. We are a newly elected committee, but we know that the challenges already. One of the challenges is our resources. There's an article saying, it's very crucial, that the states have to provide adequate resources to the implementation of the convention. Now, what does that mean, adequate resources? We know all of you are suffering of the lack of resources. There is a serious underfunding in this area of violence against women and gender inequality, and this is the reason why we are not making progress. One of the reasons that we don't invest enough in this area is that we are investing too much in other areas, like militarization. And here I want to quote the General Secretary of the United Nations, Ban Ki-moon, who said, "Our world is overarmed and peace is underfunded." And if you look at how much is going into armed conflict and war, there's a wonderful brochure by our sisters from Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, who have been here for their 100th anniversary this year. They have made a calculation that in 1 year, in 2013, in the world, $1.7 trillion have been spent on military issues. And how much would we be able to finance with that? What would be able to finance with that? We would be able to finance 650 years of the work of UN.
650 years.
6,500 years of the work of UN women. So we are investigating in the wrong area, and we have to change that. And Grevio will support that. And there is an article in the Beijing Platform for Action recommending to the states that they should reduce military spending and invest it in social and equality issues.
Excellent point,
Rosa.
To
do that together.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you. We need to move on. Thank you. So, Marlene, when you... I suppose there must be some parallels with what you have to tell, but... Claro, ¿por qué no? Okay, mañana también, sí. So, Marlene, the WHO global plan, can you tell us about that, please?
Yes.
And we need to shorten this.
Sure.
I'm sorry, yes.
Yes, thanks, happy to be here. So I work at the World Health Organization that is within the UN, setting the norms and the standards on health. And we all know that violence against women and girls and children is not only a human rights violation, but has also serious implications for their health, physical, mentally. I'm an obstetrician gynecologist. I've seen many, many women with implications on pregnancy and sexual and reproductive health. So we know the problem, we do the research, the publications, the evidence, but then within WHO we are a member state-driven organization, and we have led a resolution that was voted by the General Assembly of the World Health Organization last year, to a resolution for the healthcare sector, the role of the healthcare sector in fighting violence against women and girls and against children, providing tools to the healthcare workers and so on. Now, it took
what are the problems you're facing and what do you need from us?
1.5 years to get this resolution adopted. And now a resolution, as it was said already, is a piece of paper. Now we have to implement to make it happen. So we need a global action plan. And WHO has been asked by member states to develop that global action plan. That's what I'm doing since now 1.5 years. And we are receiving more and more pushback to that global action plan. Again, starting from the UN definition of violence against women of 1993, many of these so-called aspects that are already acquired are getting pushback. We spent 3 days this week to discuss the global action plan.
I just need to know, I know
with member
that
states, and let me
what
tell
do you need from us?
Let me tell you that what member states are bringing, the diplomats who are there in Geneva to discuss with us, they push back. So we need from you, be it the civil society, be it representatives of ministries, that you talk to your representatives in the UN to please move this agenda forward, because things on the agenda are the sexual minority groups, our access, what is interpersonal violence, what is intimate partner violence. The definition was not accepted because marital rape was there and child marriage. 39,000 children are married every day, and still discussions are going on whether child marriage should be pushed. One good thing I want to end, so we ask you, please support through your organizations. One last thing, Princess Mary reported to the Sustainable Development Goals and the framework. Good news, last week we had meetings on the indicators, because you know, 169 targets, how many indicators? We need indicators to measure. So how many indicators? Could not be 500, but we are very happy that the ones who had the green light now in that area are indeed legal frameworks against promoting equality. The prevalence of intimate partner violence, the prevalence of sexual violence, child marriage, and FGM are now, since a couple of days, officially given the green light to be measured in the new framework.
That is good. Thank you. Thank you. So this conference is actually about connecting and acting. So I'd like to keep things without the figures and the statistics. I'd like to keep it about people. So Maya, when I talk to you, I'm giving you that responsibility. Your work focuses on cross-border protection of vulnerable adults and children. So can you tell us what we can do? We, all of us, and people outside, and people watching TV tonight and seeing this. What can we do?
Thank you, Aldith. I'll just give a little bit of background on tiny, very quick, because I want people also in this room to know about the project that's currently on the agenda of my international organization. It's the only international legislative body in The Hague that creates binding treaty law. So it's a very exciting new project on the recognition and enforcement of civil protection orders, possibly other types of protection orders. And as you all know, legal protection orders or restraining orders, they're known by other names, have been a pioneering legal tool to try to help keep people safe who are affected by domestic violence, other forms of violence against women. And we have done our internal research to find that over 120 states worldwide have some sort of protection order legislation. Whether it's implemented and enforced properly is another question.
That seems to be the problem all around, doesn't it? Yes.
There seems to be an evolving global legal infrastructure that our member states would like to potentially make into a new international convention. And the protection orders also address issues along the continuum of violence against women, including human trafficking, forced marriage, FGM, et cetera, that have strong cross-border legal implications. So what can we do in terms of this project? We would really, really love your input. There's a wealth of knowledge here. And we're having a consultation session tomorrow at our offices, which is just across the street. So you're very warmly invited. Just let me know if you'd like to take part in that. And we'd love also if you reached out to your states to perhaps suggest, if you think this is an important project, that women should and others should have protection orders recognized and enforced no matter if there are international boundaries. Women travel now. Victims of violence or survivors of violence shouldn't fear for their safety just because they have to travel to see friends and family in another country, for example. And in terms of engagement of our member states, we have very good support from North America, Latin America, Asia Pacific in general. Europe is a region we still have to bring in and have dialogue, interestingly.
What's the Caribbean doing?
Interesting. Engaged in our work, and we shall engage the Caribbean further. Yes.
So I'm extremely sorry that we have to really keep this short, but I'm pretty sure that all three of you are involved in parallel sessions today and tomorrow still. So any details and more connecting and acting can take place there. I have to cut this short now, but thank you so much for being with us and for giving us some insights into the important work that you do. So Marleen Temmermans, Rosa Logar, and Maya Groff. I need to be briefed here. So quickly rounding up, because I just heard that the parallel sessions have been moved to 3:15, but we're not quite done yet. I'd like to ask back our fabulous chair of the GNWS to recap this afternoon. Bandana Rana, please join me on stage for the last time today. And we keep it short. You can just improvise. Come here. Lovely.
This is unexpected.
It is very unexpected, I know, but I know you can cope with this. Maybe you would like me to ask you a few questions.
Sure, yeah, that would be good.
You've been here most of the afternoon. Is there something that stood out, something that you... Because I want us to go on from talking to action. Is there anything that sparked you and that gives you, hands and feet to get into action?
No, something that really struck me, coming from a very small developing country, having strong patriarchal norms and violence against women that exists and persists. Yesterday we watched the excerpts of the film Brave Miss World, and the message was, speak out. All rape survivors need to speak out, and all survivors of violence need to speak out. The definition she made between a victim and a survivor was, until you keep the pain inside you and you don't confront it and do anything about it, you are a victim because you consider yourself a victim. But if you want to confront with your pain and then help others who may be in similar pain, then you are a survivor. I think that was a very strong point, because we do get confused with what a victim is, and survivors get asked about how to use this term. The other thing that when you say speak out, and this morning also, actually, I was very disturbed yesterday because I also work directly with survivors of violence through shelters. Our organization works with shelters. And the dilemma that we face is the bureaucratic, the lengthy, the non-functional legislative processes, which compels us, even us being a right-based worker, sometimes to tell our survivors of sexual violence, looking at the trauma that they are going through every day, which is increasing their trauma, we are sometimes compelled to say maybe we should find an alternative solution, which I know is not a right-based approach, which I know is not the right thing to do, but I feel that unless and until our states are made accountable for the protection of all survivors of violence so that they can share their story, they can speak out and demand justice it is very difficult for us to tell the survivors to speak out without looking at the implications. Now, this is a question I put to everyone.
This is something that we can work with, I'm sure.
So we need to work together with this. How do we make this secure? And so that we speak out and claim justice for all survivors.
Like I said yesterday, maybe we should stop asking and start demanding. Absolutely. Is that what you mean?
Yes. That is what
so thank you.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to put this across. Thank you.
Bandana Rana.
Thank you.
That leaves me with just a few more things to share with you on your way out to your parallel sessions. The data account report that Bandana Rana handed over to Princess Mary will be handed to you on your way out of this plenary room. Once more, I would like on the screen all the ways that we can connect to GNWS, where you can find the films and the pictures and everything else that goes on during this conference. Make sure that you use these addresses to share with your colleagues, family, etc. So we're ending this plenary session for now. Tomorrow at 9 o'clock sharp, we will start here again. The theme will be innovative approaches to eliminate violence against women and to support survivors. On your way out, please hand in your headset. And for those of you staying in this room, the film that Bandana just mentioned, Brave Miss World, will be shown here in this plenary in its entirety. So for those of you interested, stay in this room, and others, please go to your sessions now. It was a wonderful day, if I may say so. So looking forward to more tomorrow, and I'll see you then. Thank you for now.